We got a brand new firmware for the Yamaha YC series of keyboards 1.4. Let's check it out. Hey guys, it's Steve from Featherlightstudio, and Yamaha has got a brand new firmware out for their YC series of keyboards, and kudos to Yamaha for keeping this board alive and keep bringing new functionality and new features and new sounds to these boards, because this guy has just been everywhere with me in just about every kind of gig scenario and every kind of club and festival, every kind of weather event, teardown setups, man, everything. And it has performed unbelievably well. And I can't say enough about it in that regard, because Yamaha's really built a really durable but fun to play live stage keyboard that sounds amazing. It just sounds amazing. The breadth and width of sounds and control you have over them is really unmatched, but I gotta give it to Yamaha for keeping this alive with new firmware updates and new features and new sounds this late in the game for a keyboard that's 3 or 4 years old. You know, most manufacturers have long since forgot about those by then, but Yamaha keeps updating this with new functionality and new sounds and new capabilities. This particular firmware update adds some really cool features, a brand new VCM Organ, some cool EQ features and stuff. We'll get into all of that, but I got to give it to Yamaha, I really do, for keeping this alive with new life and new sounds and new features and new functions and stuff. So that really just makes this that much more fun to play. The YC series of keyboards is already a monster to play live. I mean, already, and it's a joy to play in the studio as well, but the fact that it is so robust and it's so well made and so well put together that it can withstand a huge amount of varied circumstances in a live environment and in a studio environment, you got to give it to them when they get it right. And in this particular case, Yamaha really got it right. So let's dive in and find out a bit more about this new firmware update 1.4 that adds some really killer new features to the Yamaha YC series of keyboards. First up, it is super important not to have your power situation look like this. Make sure you have clean, uninterrupted power. If the update process gets interrupted, you could severely damage your keyboard. This firmware update can be applied to any keyboard with a firmware earlier than 1.4, so step 1 is to back up all of our sounds and data to our own USB key. This is super important because it can't be the same key that we do the update with. Once the YC is powered up, we can check the current firmware version by going to Menu, scroll down to Version Info, and this will give us the current firmware version that's on the keyboard at the moment. Step 3 is to back up all of our current user sounds and live sets and onboard data to the USB key. And it's important also not just to do one major backup, but also individual live sets and your really important voices as well. We're going to repeat this process with the new firmware voices as well. And this really helps with the organization when you're trying to build new live sets, specifically individual voices. If you cursor over an existing file on the key, it'll simply ask you if you want to overwrite it and then give you a chance to enter or cancel. Step 4 is to power off the keyboard and then remove the USB key that contains all of that user backup information. Put it in a safe place. We're going to need it later. Step 5 is to get a brand new USB key, and preferably a high-speed key, as each one of the firmware updates increases in size, and this will speed up the process considerably, and then power on the keyboard. Step 6 is to format that new USB key, and it has to be done inside the YC. Press Menu, scroll down to File, and then scroll down to File Utility. From here, we can choose Rename, Delete, and Format, and we're going to format the key from here. When we hit Enter, it'll give us a chance to back up by hitting Cancel, or it'll complete the format process, and it needs to be done inside the YC. Trust me on this, I've tried it a bunch of ways. If you don't do that, it won't work. Now we power off the YC, and from here we can remove our newly formatted USB key that we'll be using for our firmware update. Step 7 is to take that brand new USB key, preferably high speed, that we just formatted, and plug it directly into the computer, and from there we're going to navigate to the Yamaha Firmware Update download page. I'll leave this info in the links below so you can go right to it. It'll give you all the information that the new update changes, and it'll show that for each one of the firmware updates. But maybe the most important thing on this page before you hit agree and download the firmware update is the caution that this will overwrite all of your data and your user presets and sounds. This is super important, and a lot of people just blaze past this, but it's important to know all firmware updates do this, and that's why we saved meticulously both our live sets and individual sounds beforehand. Step 8 is to navigate where that download went to and copy just the PGM file itself to your brand new firmware key. Most modern computers will unzip this automatically for you on Mac and PC, but if you have an older computer, you might need to download an app like WinZip or something to unzip the file contents. Once you do, you'll see a bunch of PDFs and some text files in there. This gives you a detailed readout of each one of the changes and the new features on the firmware, in addition to a text file that shows you exactly how to update it step by step. Once the file is unzipped, navigate down to the 8T25OS.pgm file and move that over to our brand new formatted key. No other files can be present, and it can't be in any kind of folder. It has to be the only thing on the USB key. And have some patience as each firmware update gets larger and larger in size. This current one, 1.40, is well over 1.5 gigs. From here, we can remove our USB key that contains our new firmware update and head back to the keyboard. Once the key is inserted and ready to go, there's a special power-up sequence that we have to do before we can turn the power on. We have to hold down both the store and the menu keys at the same time and keep holding them on when we power up, and continue holding them until we see the first menu right after the now loading screen that appears. And that'll be the updater menu. We can release the buttons at that point, and from here we can start the update process. It'll give us a readout of the current firmware as well as the new one we're updating to. We can exit out of here if we choose to, and if we hit the enter button, it'll give us a warning that it's going to initialize all the user data. And here it starts the update process. This is a long process as there's a lot to download into the YC, so have some patience. The overall elapsed time will vary considerably depending on the speed of the USB key that you're copying from. And this is really where using a high-speed USB key pays off in dividends. It really speeds up this process. Our total elapsed time here took right around 20 minutes, and we had a really new high-speed key that was about 64 gig in capacity. After the firmware update is completed, the machine will tell you to turn itself off, and that completes the firmware update process. Step number 10 is to power back up the YC keyboard and check out all the voices. And when we first power it up, the machine is set back to its factory initialized state, which means the CFX is on 1 and so on. So we've got our firmware freshly installed into the YC, and we have all that new wave data to play with. So let's take a quick look at some of these new voicings. Now, full disclosure, I'm a lot of things, but an experienced jazz organist is not one of them. So I'll leave some links to some videos in the description below that go into a much deeper dive of what these new voicings are really capable of, because there's a lot of things like splits and layers and things that are really targeted toward things like jazz trio players and that kind of stuff. So if you really want to take a deep dive into some of these new voices, I'll leave that in the links below just so this video doesn't end up being 2 hours long. Most of the new sounds that they put on for this particular firmware are actually in Bank 18. So Bank 18 1 through 8 show up with all the new sounds, with one exception. In the very first live set 1, Sound 5 is the debut of the new H4 organ in kind of a jazz sound. A lot of emphasis on percussion. You've got a really nice percussive voice to play with. Over here on 18.6, there's just a really funky and super fun kind of a Wurlitzer with an organ back, and this is the H4 as well. It's got this just super funky. On number 4 of Bank 18, there's a really pretty ballad organ that I'm just in love with the sound of this. It's really pretty. there's a really nice gospel layer in here that's got a piano and that H4 organ on here as well. It's just a ball to play. There's some great splits in here as well. So you've got like bass on the bottom. Lots of stuff in here to play with. There's some really funky, like kind of sound design stuff on 18.8. So some really fun stuff to play around with. They haven't done a ton of voices, just one bank of them, but it's really just to give you kind of a starting point. And, you know, the H4 is really meant to be used with the other H1, 2, and 3 organs, just because there's a real emphasis on percussion, bottom end, that kind of stuff. So really, you're just going to basically use it as another organ in your arsenal of organs that you already have for all your patches and everything. So speaking of that, let's go about saving these internal sounds as well, because we want to make sure that we actually save these live set sounds in our own sounds. We want to be able to incorporate them, not just overwrite them and then just have these. So let's break this down and we'll attach our old USB key. I keep it in there all the time so that I'm always able to like load to an external device as well as the internal memory, just in case I get a power outage or something like that. It works great. So first, let's power down the YC, and we're going to load back in our original USB key that we saved our original sounds to. We'll power back up the YC, and then go through each one of the sounds and save the ones we want to our original USB key. When we find a voice that we like, we'll hit Menu, and we'll scroll down to File, and then from there, hit Enter and scroll down to Save Live Set Sound File and hit Save again. And if we just accept the default new file, it'll save the name of the patch. So this particular case, it's Gospel Layer. And if we hit it once again, it just saves it. So saving individual files allows us to load them back in where we want them later into our new sets. This is a good idea for individual sounds that we find that we like, but it's also a good idea just to save the entire live set page itself. In case you want to load the entire thing into a bank, it's quick and dirty and saves all the sounds inside the live set for you automatically. One thing to take note of when you're saving live set pages, so a set of all your patches, it's important to note that if you just accept the default naming structure, like you go down to Menu, go down to the root, and then if you just choose New File here, these are all the other files that are currently on the USB key, and they could be individual files, they could be live set sound files, but if you just accept the default that it gives you here, New File, and you click on it, it's not going to save the page name from its current position. It's going to save the page name based on how many pre-existing live sets are already on your key. So for example, if you already have 3 live set pages saved on your USB key, it's going to name this one live set page 4, just to keep that in mind. And we finally have the ability to save our master equalization settings. Now, this has been a big requested feature for a long time. Up until this point, the master EQ section has really been to equalize the different live and studio recording environments on the fly. So you don't have to get a hold of the front of house or the monitor guy. You can basically just dial in or dial out the sound that you're trying to get rid of, or the, you know, if you want a little more top end or bottom end. But we finally have the ability to actually use that as another sound design tool. And this is pretty slick. So you could start tweaking until we found something that sounded good. That little bit top end. A little spank on the bottom. And then start dialing in the mids. And And then we can save that result. So we simply go to Settings, we go to Sound, down to Function, and then now we have an additional menu option. So we still have transpose and split point, but now we can go down to Live Set EQ, and we can turn this feature on or off. So if you still want to use it the way it was before, no problem. But if you go to the mode switch and turn it on, and then go to the EQ settings, it'll basically mimic everything that you've just done. So it's still all of the spontaneity and everything that you, like whatever you tweak it to, you can simply save it as that. And the EQ on and off switch can be saved per sound. So that solves a ton of different problems. If you want to use it, you know, in one aspect, or maybe for one whole set that's just a room correction thing, and then for another whole set, use it just for tone, maybe just for organ tone, or just like in this case for Rhodes, or you know, something like that. So welcome feature, super cool to see that now that's an option that we can turn on or off, so we can use it the way we did before, or we've got an entirely new sound design tool. So there it is, a brand new firmware update for the Yamaha YC series of keyboards. And as you can see, aside from adding cool new sounds and a new organ engine to play with and a bunch of other cool features and functionality, I really got to hand it to Yamaha for giving this board some love after so many years. You know, by this time in most other manufacturers' life cycles, they'd have long since moved on to newer models. And even though Yamaha has some killer newer models, like with the Montage series and stuff, they keep infusing the YC boards with new sound, new capabilities, and all this stuff. And it's like getting a new keyboard every year. So when somebody gets it right, you got to give it to them. And Yamaha got it right with the YC series of keyboards. That has really helped make this board the one to own. This really has become the live stage keyboard to own, and it's because of Yamaha's constant involvement and constant improvement on this already amazing and incredibly capable engine as it is. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. If you learned something or if this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It really does help keep a channel like this going, helps me make more videos like this. Stay safe, be creative. Add something creative to the world. It could really use it. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next video.